All right, folks, we're live.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll get into our second look at the 25-26 budget. So just to get right into our presentation before we look at some of the documents that are there. Our focus of budgeting remains the same. So we start off with our strategic priorities, and certainly this year is an indication of those priorities. We've been working well in the service of those. The science of reading has been a priority for us this last year in particular. Last year, week, we had a professional development series for our elementary teachers, which I'll discuss in my report regular meeting. Another component of our strategic plan has been to increase academic discussion with students, teachers, families. And we are this week sending home reports, family reports on student performance to date on their NWEA assessments. And I'll be reviewing some really positive academic data with the board later in the regular meeting. And also one of our initiatives in our strategic plan over the last 5 years has been to promote student and staff wellness. And last week we had our first ever student wellness day, which I'll talk about in the meeting. So lots of good things. The other focus areas of our budget are, of course, the goals of the board, which we discuss at the end of each meeting. We look at the areas that we've moved forward in and the goals that the board has put forth for me as superintendent. Some of those I've discussed over the course of the school year. So those have been to identify childcare solutions with the hopes of implementing some support for young families in the district, which, as you know, that is moving very favorably with St. Agnes stepping up. So we're grateful to see that happen in September. Preparing to launch the district's driver ed program, which is on course to launch as well. Continuing to research and report on the district's civic readiness, which we've been doing over the course of the year. Generating plans to review our facility and security improvements, we've been speaking about of late, and implementing a goal-setting feedback process utilizing our NWEA data, which we're working on with teachers right now. So a lot of the goals that are in place for the year are coming to fruition. Of course, maintaining our community schools program is a priority for the district. And we heard from Mr. Clark at our last meeting, and his vacancy notice for that position lapses effective today. And we have multiple interested applicants for that position. So it's good to see that have staying power. Of course, the core of what we do is to meet the many needs of students. The ethos of the board is and has been students first and foremost. And we have approached improvement as a district through collaboration, both internally with departments, teachers, students, families, and externally with our partners across the region. And then, of course, we're always looking at ways that we can realize efficiencies. With the costs of goods and services rising exponentially and the limitations imposed on revenue at the district for the tax cap at 2%, realizing efficiencies is a necessity for our district. So we're doing this. So those are our focus areas for budgeting. If we move on to the process remains the same as it has every year. When we get additional information on revenue and expenses, we populate that into our known and unknown documents. And that becomes the basis for our proposed budget. And then based on that information, we have to make some strategic decisions about how we achieve our goals and what our budget priorities are given the limited funding that we may have. And that gets us to our knowns and unknowns. And Danny, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but are health insurance and BOCES the two that were the big unknowns for us as of last time? Were there others as well?
No, everything else had already been known, correct.
So we'll certainly go through these. Dana, I'll ask you to speak to that in just a second, but they have the health insurance one, a 12% increase. That is massive. That is going to have a very significant impact on us, and we are, we have plans to weather that accordingly. But as an industry that continues to rise in costs exponentially, but our revenue, 79% of the revenue that the district brings in is brought forth from the property taxes, and that is capped at 2% due to the property tax cap. And Dana will discuss actually how our property tax cap this year is looking like 1.86 due to some variables from last year. So, Dana, why don't you talk a little about that?
Yeah, so when you look at the property tax cap at 1.86, that was set in the last budget workshop we had. And how we came about that number is the actual exclusions and tax cap as it sees up there, the cap is at 2%, but include our exclusions, it was really more like 2.5%. But we had to adjust this year from a previous year in terms of aid that we received, specifically transportation aid that was calculated after everything was done last year. So we had to incorporate the number there is $127,721 we had to use for reserves for this current year because of how things played out last year. So basically, we had to reallocate. So that's how we get to the 1.86% for this current year, is because we are actually using $127,000 out of reserves to help offsets because of some aid that we received last year that was not put into the tax cap calculation last year because it came in after the fact and stuff like that. So we had to adjust. The state says if this is what you got, it has to be part of the exclusion. It was not part of the exclusion last year because that information changed after the fact. We have to make the adjustments this current year. Because in theory, what they're saying is you collected $127,000 more than what you should have collected last year. We had a fund balance last year of $400,000. So,
Did you get an apology letter?
yes. You can have your 2 cents. I don't know what it would come out down to each person, but so that's why, because we ended up having a surplus last year anyway. So in reality, that was offset. So we adjusted to this way. That's what the state says. That's how we got to the 1.86%.
And our executive budget from the state, to our knowledge, has not changed. Governor Hochul has come forth, with an indication to work with the legislature to, retain safe, harmless funding for districts such as ours, whose population has decreased since the formula was enacted. So certainly that's good news for us. Although, as I referenced, the bulk of our revenue comes locally. So that stable presence from the state will only have so far an impact for us. The ERS and TRS, the retirement reserves, those numbers were present at the last session that we had. And our fixed increases with regards to salaries have been embedded there for a number of years as well. So the health insurance increase, that's a real number for us. We're forecasting a total budget of $23.1 million for the year, which is a little more than a 3% increase. And when 80% roughly of the revenue we bring in is capped at, well, this coming year, 1.86 and 3.13, there's a gap there. So thankfully, we do have some reserves to help offset that gap over the next year or two. And we do have some plans of that. The other piece here that I'll reference before we look at some of our reserves is our BOCES costs. So each year, BOCES puts forth their administrative budget, and all of the component districts within the FEH BOCES, their boards vote on whether or not to support the admin budget as built. So we don't have the formal figure yet from BOCES, but early indications suggest that it will be around a 7.5% increase in their administrative budget. So that's similar to where we were with it last year. Certainly the pressures that our district feels in terms of health insurance, the staff at BOCES is part of the same consortium, and those costs in turn get passed on to us from them as well. So there's a recognition that the costs of doing business these days are certainly rising. But that's just another note that's another piece of information there. The next slide really hammers out our restricted reserves. So our present unallocated reserve balance is a little more than $5 million. just to start with what an unallocated reserve is. Basically, it's our rainy day fund as a district. The comptroller set some language in law about what the recommended level is. They indicated that it's at 4% of the total cost of the budget over the course of the year, which is a figure that essentially all officials recognize is not a practical rainy day fund. That a 10% reserve, rainy day reserve, is actually something that could be beneficial in supporting a district if they have unpredicted costs. So our unallocated reserve balance, 5 million. A lot of that was generated as a result of COVID. So during COVID, we spent less money because our footprint was smaller, and we were not able to do the trips and the sports and other activities that certainly are a component of our budget. We also had ARP funds from the feds that we were able to utilize for programming. And so that plus historically high NICLAS investment rates for the monies that were in reserve produced some yields for us that allowed our reserve to get to a level to help us to absorb the kind of year we're anticipating that we're going to have next year and the year after. So Danny, you want to talk a little more about that and about our plan for the appropriated fund balance for this coming year?
Excuse me, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if everyone else we're missing that one slide.
Which
Unallocated and restricted
Unallocated, I don't
reserves.
have that.
We don't have it.
are you in?
We're in
We've got the rest of it.
We have everything else except that.
Everything else.
Are you in the 2025 one?
Yeah, 'cause I pulled it up and I have it.
The bottom one? If you go down that, how odd.
I know, how is it that they don't have it?
We all
Yeah.
probably
See it on screen.
Not-
Right.
We're good.
Yeah, because, yeah.
It should be in there for this session on the left. If you go down to 325, it should be on
Okay,
there.
let's go back.
Oh.
It's under
okay.
number 4.
Okay, so we're not under the first look. We should
Correct.
be under.
Yes,
I apologize. This is second look.
No, that's
We
my.
create a rolling,
I heard what you said.
yeah.
Yeah, we were paying attention, but
That's all good.
we're all
Number
over here.
4,
I'm a visual
scrolling.
learner too, so
Where is it?
yes.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, sure. So we do have some recommendations for the use of the reserve fund balance, both in being a stopgap measure for some of these ballooned costs that have come in with regards to health insurance, and some of the other areas in our district. But also some recommendations about a potential capital reserve to help stabilize and create predictability for our transportation funding over the next several years. So you want to talk about the appropriated fund balance that we're proposing for this
Sure.
budget cycle, Dana?
So what you see on this slide is what we currently are sitting at, as Tim said, and what I put in here is what we have budgeted for this current year that we're in, which is that $843,000. Is what we budgeted, and what we are proposing for next year's budgets to balance the budget is the $1.214 million. To balance the budget at the $23,100,000. We have the proposed capital reserve fund specifically for the use of transportation. Is what I think that's also part of the regular meeting in terms of you guys discussing and voting on. But basically what we're trying to do is set aside up to $1 million out of our surplus and reserves for the specific use of purchasing buses in the future. Capital reserve has a maximum life of 10 years. And you have to specify exactly what you want, not the make and model, but for buses and school vehicles and all this. And by doing it this way, it allows us to keep it out of the budget, so we don't have to budget year in and year out for these purchases. So it's a way to limit our budget increase because we're using unallocated funds to buy these, make these purchases. But it also keeps our exclusion rate. So going forward, our exclusion rate, or the rate that taxpayers could pay, will sit closer at the given rates that the state sets. This year's 2%. That's why, if we didn't have the excess reserves that we have to use $127,000, we would have a tax levy of about 2.5%. So what it does is it keeps it out of that as well. So it impacts the levy by creating this. In reality, what you do is any of these reserve funds are coming from the funds that we already have. We're not asking taxpayers
Right.
to increase. It's there where we're just reallocating it, looking at the future. We already have multiple restricted reserves, and you'll see the last line there. We currently have about $2.5 million in restricted reserves. We have the tax surcery reserve. We have EDWAR for retirement. We have an unemployment reserve. We have the repair reserve of about $1 million that's in there as well. So these are all specific to needs that we use them for. That's why they call them restricted reserves. We can't just pull it into the general fund whenever we want. It has to be specific to what it's been allocated for. So we're proposing that capital reserve for the voters to vote on. So when you look at all of these things and these factors, what I'm saying is really by the end of next year, by 2026, if the plan's fund balance is used, if the proposed fund balance is used, plus the capital reserve, by the end of next year, we'll have out of that $5 million, a little over $2 million remaining in unallocated fund balance, or 9%. Still slightly over the 4% mandated, but the Rockefeller study that came out in December that the governor had asked for that dealt with foundations and all that, they actually are recommending a 10% for school districts as opposed to 4%. It's not law, mandate is still 4%. But if all of these things play out, we will be at 9% within a year.
That's good.
And allocating for future expenses and all that, so. But at the same time, what that also means then is the fact that going forward, our budgets have to not rely on fund balance as a major source of revenue, because we are, we'll be down to, in theory, 9% within the year. How much lower would we want to go and still be safe, feeling comfortable? So that's what this slide is really highlighting. It's just that, that we definitely have a plan for our unallocated fund balance.
Let me ask you a question. So do you still have in this budget the reserve for tax surcharge cases?
We have a restricted reserve, yes.
That case is gonna resolve itself, the one on the old Eli Mercy Center, the Elwood.
Oh, I don't know. Yes. I mean, we don't budget for that.
Case is approaching trial. It's 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be paying refunds. They're gonna be, so we haven't done that in years.
No, we have not.
The petitioner's lawyers will not take in the past, we've reduced the assessment artificially to produce for the petition of the savings in future years.
Right.
Prevents having to write a check. The attorneys for the petition won't do that in this case, which means when it gets resolved, it is overassessed. They'll be, at least brace yourself, we're gonna be writing checks.
Well, we have a reserve account for
Good.
that we have not
Good.
tapped into. And I think that came out of the
Whiteface
whiteface lodge.
Yeah, the Whiteface
right?
Lodge,
Yeah.
that started it all.
Yeah,
Yes, it did.
That's when Romy was the supervisor.
yes.
I just took a look at that case today, and so I mean, it's coming in 25, that's all.
Right. So yeah, we do have,
It's gonna be this year?
Huh?
It's this year? It's gonna be this year?
Oh, we'll definitely be in 25. I'm still on the email with the court system. They're scheduling a trial. I got appraisal exchange in the last 30 days. That's when it all rubber hits the road.
Because I don't think we've received it.
no, we've not like any type of final.
No, you won't
judgment on
until
that.
it's final. I'm just giving you a
Yes.
heads up.
Yeah. It's coming, you say.
Yeah, I
Yes,
understand it's
it's
coming.
Good news.
coming.
Don't be relying on that money being available.
Tuesday or something. Yeah, for real.
Not for us.
Yeah.
Easy come, easy go.
Uh-oh, window, good, okay.
So those are the the bullet points of our second draft. We pretty much have all the information we need to formulate a plan, and I think that the plan that we've been enacting over the last several years and in great haste this next year is going to see us through some ballooned costs. But as of now, the plan is to enact that $23.1 million budget and to put that forth to the voters, which is within the tax cap. And to just know that we are looking to appropriate a temporary funding mechanism with our fund balance. It's designed for this purpose. But we also know that the likelihood of rates producing the sort of investment yields that we've seen over the last several years, the likelihood of that continuing is very low. And so we know that we need to ensure that our expenses show greater parity with our revenue. So Dana and I are working with the administrative team to find ways to do that. If we have someone retiring, there's an opportunity to absorb that position and restructure, then we do that. If we can look at some of the programming budgets and purchase services and equipment, still trying to produce the best result for the students, but have greater efficiencies, we do that. And so that's really the way that we're going to bridge, this funding gap looking into next year, so that we're able to maintain that rainy day fund in subsequent years, but not adversely impact our instruction programming for the kids. So I did reference just in the pie chart there, we're in the areas that we like to see. We like to see our administrative footprint below 10%. We like to see the most amount of our dollars going towards the programming for our students. So having it in that 80% range is ideal. And in terms of our major categories, you can see some of the areas that from this current year in the red to next year in the blue, that we are going to see some reductions in. So some reductions in professional development at the end. Our tech materials budget is being decreased. Then if you move over to benefits, you'll see that that's going to hit us in a big way, and you can start to see some of the real numbers associated with that. That when you slap a 12% health insurance increase, you're really talking about $600,000. So it's a formidable figure, and we're fortunate to have a plan in the reserves to be able to account for something of that nature. Otherwise, I mean, these costs are more or less stable. I see the increase in BOCES costs at 10.79%. I'm sure that's attributable to some of the higher intensity special education services that our students receive at the Plattsburgh BOCES Center.
Yeah, when you look at it, what in the earlier slide indicated 7.5%, and as Tim mentioned, that's really the administrative components. The other increases are just that it's on the program side of what BOCES offers in terms of special ed classes, occupational programming at the Ed Center. So that's why in reality it's almost 8%. 11% is because of the program components that are factored in all BOCES expenses.
Can I back up a little?
Yes.
And in terms of the health costs, who picks the provider? How often do we reevaluate that provider? At what level is that deal negotiated?
Sure. Yeah, we are part of a health insurance consortium with the other districts and the FEH BOCES, including the BOCES themselves. And so plan design is a component of the agreements that we have in place in the consortium. Is management KB?
Well, it's One Digital now.
One Digital
KBM,
now,
it was
does it?
called, yeah. We use One Digital as our consultant group that oversees everything. They used to be KBM, so they were just bought out. the answer to your question, Don, is every 3 years. So we currently have a contract with Excelis, the ones that provide our health coverage. And as Tim said, with the consortium, it's a group coverage. So there's 10 districts that are part of it.
Yes.
And every 3 years, we kind of look at it. In fact, we just went through a process as to were we going to put out an RFP to seek other things, and we got general information. Excelis, their product is one widely available up here. It probably has the most extensive coverage up here in terms of providers than other carriers.
But those decisions are made on a group level, not
Correct.
on a district.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was my.
But every 3 years, we do have that conversation. Yes, as well as our prescription side. Excelis does not cover, is not our prescription. It's Express Scripts. It's who we use, but it's the same thing. Every couple of years, we evaluate it.
Dana is our rep on the consortium health insurance, and I'll applaud Dana. The second this 12% came to fruition, he immediately said, we need to discuss plan design. That we need to gather and get the reps of the consortium together. And I know plans are underway to look at the sustainability of things as built. So
I was just gonna say, do you have to go with a 3-year plan? I mean, if I saw a 12% increase, I'd be doing RFPs every year.
Well, see, in reality, if you look historically over the last 5 years, even 10 years, our average cost increases have been in the 6 to 7%.
Yeah.
We really have had, and that we've enjoyed that for probably the last 10 years. If you look at the market, it's probably almost double that. Over the last year, almost 2 years now, 2 cycles, we've seen a tremendous jump in costs associated with some, basically there was 10 or 11 high cost claimants that are really driving the costs. Where we're seeing, a difference of $4 to $5 million over what was budgeted. But if you look at our trend, we are sitting at 6 or 7%. This 12% is just to kind of, rectify it and acknowledge that, okay, 2 years doesn't make a trend, but if we have a 3rd year of double-digit increase, the trend starts to change to that. So we really have enjoyed for the last 10 years a very good.
We should consider ourselves lucky.
Absolutely, yes.
We should, if you consider what's going on in the rest of the world out there.
12% for us
That's what they
absolutely
do annually.
is.
Even more.
Yes, it's almost double last year. I mean, this current year, our increase was 5.5%. Conservatively, they wanted a 10% increase, but because of the health of the consortium in terms of a fund balance, 5.5 was doable. However, the reality is where we're starting to trend, we're getting closer to, we're sitting at 12% now because of that. They wanted, in order to balance, where we're bringing in as much premium and revenue as what's going out, they threw out a 25% increase to show, right. But again, the consortium is healthy enough where, a 12% mitigates it and still keeps the consortium a healthy footing. Quite honestly, we probably have one of the best health consortiums in the North Country in terms of health, the financial health of the program, as well as what we offer.
So the premiums have a lot to do with the claims experience of the group?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, as you know, when prices, if more people are going, or if it's costing, more for that visit or for that drug.
You made me really mad.
But that's driving it. I mean, where it's not unusual to see someone gets a prescription for a drug that's a $10,000 monthly cost, and the consortium, the insurance carrier, is covering most of that as opposed to the individual. Yes.
Have we explored self-insurance?
Well, this is considered self-insured. We are self-insured. So the consortium, where there are 10 schools, we are considered as self-insured. We use Excelis as our carrier. Yep. So we use Excelis as our carrier, but we are self-insured,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah, well, I know that probably the options are limited up here in the North Country for healthcare providers.
Right.
Get the Medicare thing, and it's only in this county,
Sure,
only in
in-network.
that county.
And if you look at it in terms of Excelis's costs, their admin costs and stuff like that, they're typically in that 3% range annually increase. So they're not asking for a 7-8%.
Right.
Goes back to what you said, Ron, is it's really about the usage, you know, and more people are using it and it's becoming more expensive. That's what's
That
driving up
drives it up.
the premium cost, not what Excelis is charging us to administer the costs. Yeah.
It's just like anything else insurance, whether it be home
It is
insurance,
what it
auto,
is.
it's like,
Getting a lot of
you
accident
know,
in car insurance.
yeah,
and stuff, yeah.
exactly.
The only thing that can't go up is the tax cap.
Correct.
That's true.
So true. That's the dilemma we're in.
Absolutely. So I think the health insurance is definitely having an impact.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen an increase in high need special education services for students. That is driving some of our costs to a greater degree. And certainly there still remains no aidable mechanism for providing services for English language learner instruction. And we know that we have a population in our district that we work hard to service. And when you aggregate those things, then you know, it requires you to look closely at the budget and evaluate ways to sustain things. So we're doing that. It's just, you know, it's been, it'll be more trying this year than in years past. So the next chart just shows you specifically, gives you an idea, as I referenced, where the revenue comes from the district. Primary sources are from the state and from our property taxes. And then that 5% is us utilizing the fund balance.
I mean, if we really look at it in terms of between the appropriated fund balance and the property tax, our community is funding, you know, 80, almost 85% of our budgets is through, because our fund balance, most of that has come from surplus that has been generated over the years through our revenue. So that really property tax plus fund balance is what our community, you know, portion is.
Karen, if you go to the next slide. So, you know, beyond the specifics and the finances, we're still planning on having school meals be available. There's been a lot of discussion about what the proposed reduction or dissolution of the Department of Education at the federal level will mean for school districts. I think one of the first things that we have our eyes open on very closely is this school meals for community eligible districts such as our own. So hopefully that is maintained. That would be tremendously beneficial for our kids and has been. But, you know, we still will continue with our professional development, still maintain our science of reading program. We're going to be looking into new math programming, piloting some programs in the coming year. So, you know, our Envisions program use is coming to its end next year. So our math department's working on, you know, identifying something that'll bring us into the next era. And then we'll continue supporting our English language learners, our stream program for our alternative settings for students. And our newest addition is our driver education program. So lots of good things that we're moving forward with. And Dana and I both have spoke a little bit about the benefits of creating a capital reserve. In the end, it's going to afford us the ability to purchase vehicles for such as a driver ed vehicle, a bus this year, potentially a truck. Dana and I were talking about it earlier today for our maintenance crew. But to do so from the reserve that we have and to reduce our debt service as a result of that. So if you don't have to borrow, then you don't spend as much on something. If we have those, and our mandate is to reduce our unallocated fund balance, and by moving it to a reserve to buy things we have to buy annually anyways, is good sound policy.
Yep.
And then just looking ahead, our petition process for board elections, we have 2 seats for the board that are coming up this year. So April 21st is the petition date. When is the deadline? Is it 21st?
Yes, it is.
21st is the deadline, 5 o'clock. Then we have the budget adoption on the 29th, the budget hearing on May 6th. We are on a rotation between Wilmington and Lake Placid. Every other year we have our budget hearing. Last year it was in Wilmington. This year it will be in Lake Placid. So May 6th we'll present the budget for the public. And then our vote will be on May 20th at the elementary school. So should be good. Any questions about second look, where we're at?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
With that said, I'd like to call to order our regular Board of Education meeting. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item is the consent agenda. Recommended action, approve the following items which are included in the consent agenda. 7A, minutes of the Board of Education. 8A, appointment of long-term elementary teacher. 9B, capital reserve composition resolution. 9C, BOCES board nomination. And 9D, special education. May I have a motion, please?
I move it.
Ron and Ryan. Any discussion on any of those items? If not, please vote. Seven yes. We have an anticipated executive session. Recommended action is a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussion. 10-year recommendations is anticipated. May I have a motion, please?
I'll
Ryan
second.
and Doug? Discussion? Please vote. Seven yes. We're just going to ask that our guests vacate for a little bit and then we're going to welcome you back in. You just got here.
Right.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
There's
Yeah,
dog
quickly,
things
come here
out
and speak.
there.
Karen's been baking all day.
Yes.
Yes.
And,
Doug Doug Doug.
and, St. Louis there.